Okay, so Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is now out, and throughout this video we're going to be breaking down the full movie, its Easter eggs, ending, and also those post-credit scenes.
Are you ready for one last ride?
Featuring the final outing for this version of the Guardians, this also closes the book on James Gunn's time at Marvel. Now moving over to DC, this is the director's last film before he starts running the show over at the studio's main competitor.
Hey everybody, I'm James Gunn. I'm the co-CEO of DC Studios.
I'm going to be getting into it all, but heavy spoilers ahead, so if you haven't had a chance to check it out, then check out now. I also want to give a huge thank you to our sponsors, comicbookdirect.com, who've helped make this video. Got tons of graphic novels, and if you're a physical collector like I am, then you definitely need to check this place out, as it feels like it was built for fans like us. They work with all the major publishers like Marvel and DC, and the best thing about the site is that if you're in the middle of a run, you can subscribe to it to get every issue sent out directly as they release. Really cool site, and if you use the link below, you're going to get 20% off your first order. They've also got manga and figures, so if you want to get those brand new Guardians Funko Pops, then definitely head over to the link in the description. Now this movie's been in development for a number of years due to not only the pandemic, but also because James Gunn got fired by Disney. They looked for a director to fill his shoes, but after everyone turned them down, where did their failure bring them? Back to me, him. Now because of this, the order of things has been switched slightly, as Thor was originally supposed to feature in this film, instead of the Guardians popping up at the start of Love and Thunder. Still though, the plot threads left at the end of Avengers Endgame are still very apparent, with Peter pining after his long-lost love Gamora. She becomes a pivotal character too, with her now leading the Ravagers, and this is all about bringing the family together before we finally say goodbye. Now the movie itself begins with a flashback of Rocket, aka Subject 89P13. This designation something that he's known as in the comics, and it's also the name that we saw pop up in the prison scene in the first Guardians movie. Underneath this, we could see that his known associates were Lila, who is a big character in the comics that makes her debut here. Don't really know why she's classed as an associate, as she unfortunately dies before seeing freedom, and she gets a really devastating character journey that pushes Rocket to become the way he is.
We'll all fly away together. One last time. Into the forever and beautiful sky.
The subject number is also tattooed on him, which is highly reminiscent of the Holocaust and how the Jews were treated. Now amongst a cage full of other Racoons, he's picked by the High Evolutionary, and the early experiments we end up seeing highly resemble how his origins played out in the source material. We discover that the High Evolutionary has been attempting to create a utopia, and that he's built a machine which speeds up the evolution process by millions of years within seconds. This turns them into angry monsters though, and it's only through Rocket's intervention that he perfects the process. This allows him to create a so-called perfect species, which frustrates him because he owes it all to something that he sees as an abomination. Now, along with Rocket, we of course get Lila, Floor, and also Teefs. Got a lot of Sid and Toy Story vibes from it, as they all get things like either mechanical arms, metal teeth, feet for wheels, and so on and so forth. Now, though it seems like the High Evolutionary views Rocket as a companion, he actually just wants to incinerate him and his friends now that he's figured out the process. Rocket manages to escape, but sadly his allies are killed, leading to him being out on his own in the galaxy. He did, however, claw at the High Evolutionary's face on his way out, and we'll talk about this reveal with this later on in the video. Now in the holiday special, we saw that Peter returned to the bottle, and that's very much the case here, with a lot of scenes echoing the way he was in the special presentation. Not even the gift of Kevin Bacon could stop the 7 degrees of separation he's feeling, and without her he's left like a hollow man. Hey, haven't that? Now we begin these scenes with Rocket listening to his Zune and muttering along to the songs, which comes full circle at the end when he and everyone start dancing to The Dog Days Are Over by Florence and the Machine. Anyway, out of nowhere, Adam Warlock arrives on Nowhere in order to grab Rocket. He's a big addition to the MCU, and we got our first tease to him all the way back in the last Guardians movie. They actually did things in a weird order, as Warlock was someone who primarily went toe-to-toe with Thanos in the Infinity storylines that spanned several years. Warlock in the comics possesses the Soul Stone on his forehead, which was gifted to him by the High Evolutionary in the source material. He was also originally mates with Drax, and even a love interest of Gamora, which is a direction they could go with this multiversal version. Anyway, after first appearing in Fantastic Four 67, the character was originally created on Earth by the group known as the Enclave. Simply referred to as him, he was renamed Adam Warlock by the High Evolutionary, which is sort of adapted into this film. They cut stuff out with the Enclave and instead just have the High Evolutionary creating the Sovereign, which then went on to go and create Adam. Known as the Warlock, he was pulled out of the pod early, which is why he's slightly underdeveloped mentally. Now he ends up learning empathy through the little animal Blurb, whose voice is provided by D. Bradley Baker. This is kind of also Gunn's audition for Superman, with him possessing all of the powers and more that the Man of Steel does. What he doesn't have though is his developed mind though, and instead Adam's more like a fish out of water learning his way in the world. You could say he was born yesterday. Who the f*** writes this shit? Now along with him is the High Evolutionary, who's a big character that also comes from the comics. In the movie he says that he journeyed to Earth and this is likely where he picked up Rocket, however it doesn't seem like he's actually from there like how he is in the source material. However, he has an obsession with our music and sees all the elements of sound being brought together to create something beautiful as a motif that he can adapt into his creations. Now the comics had him being born in Manchester under the name Herbert Wyndham at the start of the 20th century. Early on in his childhood he moved out to the Welsh countryside with his parents, and this happened during the 1920s. Here he learned the work of Nathaniel Essex, aka the X-Men villain known as Mr. Sinister. Working away in his parents' basement, he carried out experiments on rats, fascinated with attempting to genetically engineer animals to be what his sick and twisted heart desired. Studying science for the majority of his life, he was eventually given a serum to unlock genetic codes, but the controversy around his experiments got him expelled from Oxford. At this point, he moved to Wundagore Mountain, which they ended up bringing across into Multiverse of Madness. Speaking of Wanda, we learn in the comics that she and her brother had been born in the mountain, where Chthon's power touched them. The High Evolutionary even got them the midwife in Bova, which we actually got a nod to at the start of WandaVision episode 2. They might possibly tie this all in because it's a human cow, but they might not. I just thought I'd go over it and waste your time. Anyway, like the comics, the High Evolutionary also created Counter-Earth, which we see in this film. There's lots of animal cruelty in this movie, with the High Evolutionary easily being the most sadistic villain that we've ever had in the MCU. He's Peter's worst nightmare, and I don't mean Quill. No, it is messed up what he does. There's lots of scenes with him that I think are really difficult to watch, and he's going to be someone who leaves a big impression on everyone leaving the film. Now Warlock decapitates Groot, and he leaves him like a spider head, which I think is a nod to the Thing. He almost kills Drax and blasts Rocket with a beam, and this leaves the character being at death's door. In the end, Nebula's the one who ends up bringing Adam down, and she's slowly becoming one of my favourite characters in the MCU. I think Karen Gillan really came into her own with the character during Endgame, and she's actually gone through an arc in these movies in turning from a villain to a hero. Now we learn that built into Rocket is a kill switch that will flatline the character if they use a med pack to try and heal his wounds. Having just 48 hours until he dies, they head out looking for a way to save him, which takes them to what I think is a company called Orgo Corp. Scribbled it down in the cinema, it looks like nothing in the light of day, and I can't quite remember what they were called, but I think it was that. Anyway, on their way they encounter the new Ravagers leader in Gamora, and after teaming up with her, they discover that the key file on Rocket's parts in one of the High Evolutionary's recorders. These are people that are basically mentats from Dune, and they serve the High Evolutionary in all of his experiments. The team break into Orgo Corp HQ to get the data, and it's basically a reverse prison scene from that first movie. The entire location is pretty much James Gunn's friend and family, and we get cameos from Nathan Fillion, Jennifer Holland, what I think is Daniela Malquire, and probably the guy who plays John Economos. Couldn't fully tell if it was him under the makeup, but judging by the rest of the place, I'm guessing that it's him. Now they learn that the data needed is in the recorder, and from here they head out to Counter-Earth. Now on the other side of this, we discover why the Evolutionary wants Rocket so badly, and that Adam Warlock and Aisha have been hired to track him down. As some of the team head out to deal with the Evolutionary, we watch as Adam goes to get Rocket, which leads to him even going toe-to-toe with the Evolutionary's War Pig. The other part of the team end up getting to the villain's base, which is where we discover that he wants to destroy the planet and start again. He seeks perfection above all else, and Counter-Earth has ended up becoming as messed up as their own planet is. Peter manages to get his hands on the recorder, but the planet's still destroyed along with Adam's mother Aisha. Now back on the ship, they try and heal Rocket, but unfortunately he flatlines, which sends him into the afterlife. Now death is something that they've started to show more and more in the MCU, with us discovering the afterlife somewhat a personalised construct depending on what you want it to be. I believe that when you die you get stuck in a room with Dua Lipa and you get to I have my own beliefs, and we've seen with characters like Moon Knight and Jane in Love and Thunder that other afterlives exist. In Rockets, he sees cages, along with Lila, Teeths and Flaws, in what becomes a really heartbreaking scene. Now, the other Guardians, i.e. Drax, Nebula and Mantis, went out to rescue Peter and Groot, and they get stuck on the ship as it travels into space. They discover the Evolutionaries been creating children with platinum hair, one of which we learn is Phylla Vell. Now, this is actually a big character in the Marvel Universe, and she'll likely tie in with Captain Marvel at some point down the line. She ended up taking up the mantle in her own reality, though it has to be said there are other versions of her. However, I think they might stick with that one, and it will give that role as a mantle that can be passed on. Anyway, the Guardians end up following the Evolutionary out into space, and we get a fight in which the villain unleashes his Hellspawn, whilst Kraglin uses a massive cannon built into Nowhere's Eye. It's such a cool action scene that uses an incredible landmark in the MCU that I wasn't expecting to be brought across like this. Quill and Gamora go to attack, but Adam boards the ship, which causes it to crash land on the Evolutionary's vessel. Peter uses the self-destruct to try and kill Adam, but he ends up surviving, and in the end Groot saves him because everyone deserves a second chance. And with this, we also get the appearance of the creatures from the start of the second Guardians film, and these are tamed by Mantis. Come the end of the movie, she goes off into the galaxy with them, and this is in order to try and find herself. She's someone who was just used as a servant by Ego, and even upon joining the Guardians, she too ended up just following their orders. So the movie ends for her with her saying her goodbyes to the group, and I have to admit, I had a little tear on my eye just like Drax did. And we also get an incredible one-take scene with the Guardians all uniting together, and I think this is probably the standout in Gunn's portfolio when it comes to directing. I love one-ers, and just seeing how well choreographed and put together this is completely blew me away. Anyway, after freeing all of the Evolutionaries' animals and experiments, they get them on board Nowhere, whilst Rocket finally learns what a Racoon is. At this point, the High Evolutionary arrives and beats the crap out of him, calling him 89P13, but Rocket says he's no longer that. He's Rocket Racoon, which is a great little character moment, and after blasting away at the villain, the Guardians arrive to smash him like it's the like button. At this point, we also learn what really happened to his face all those years ago when Rocket first scratched at it. Guys done a Robocop and pulled his skin over his skull to stop him looking like how Two-Face would if his face was symmetrical. Now, the Guardians don't end up killing him, and though his ship's destroyed, there is potential we could get an X-Men tie-in due to his ties to Nathaniel Essex. Essex has appeared as a name throughout the X-Men movie, with Essex Corp featuring in Logan, Deadpool 2 and the New Mutants. However, Mr. Sinister never showed up in the films, and with them bringing across certain elements of those movies into the MCU, they could end up carrying them across them into this universe. Now, Peter rushes to grab his Zune as the Evolutionary ship explodes, and though it seems like he's going to die in the cold vacuum of space, he's saved by Adam Warlock. Anyway, the Guardians return to the bar on Nowhere for one final goodbye, and Groot actually says, "I love you guys." Though the dog days are over though, they must go their separate ways, and it's a very bittersweet way to close out this movie. I was thinking that Peter and Gamora might end up hooking back up, but they have a sort of mature goodbye in which she says she imagined that he and her other version had fun together. There was like three tiny bits in the movie where it got me, and the first was the big hug scene after Peter lived, the second bit was with Mantis going off, and then this moment of Gamora imagining the life they had, whilst Peter actually remembered it. Now, the relationship being over shows that there are actually consequences, and though Gamora was brought back, she isn't the same person. James Gunn has talked openly about how he felt like death in his films should be final, but there has been the multiverse that's kind of been undoing this. Thus, I think a smart way to show that things matter was to not have them end up together. Peter decides to head back to Earth, and this brings things full circle from that first movie. In the final scene with him, we watch as he reunites with his grandfather, who was the first person that brought him in to see his mother in that first film. Peter ended up disappearing without a trace after he was picked up by Yondu, and he's avoided Earth as it's very much become a place of trauma for him. In her dying breath, his mother asked for him to take her hand, but he ran away from this and was then taken off-world. To me, he's definitely tried to bury this and probably felt guilt over running out on her before she passed away. I think a lot of people can relate to avoiding the scene of a trauma like this, and though Peter has been back to Earth, he's not went back to his family. Him returning home brings things full circle, with him reuniting with a family that he lost. The Guardians movie were very much about him creating his own family with this bunch of misfits, but now he's returned back to his original one. The first movie was about the group being formed, and the second was about his dad, who he ended up realizing wasn't all he was cracked up to be. Throughout the trilogy, he's been trying to create a version of his family when his real one was back on Earth for this entire time. He goes to his grandfather's house and asks his wife if Mr. Quill is there, which is when he finally goes in the backyard and the pair embrace. Now in the second post-credits scene, we see the opposite side of this, with him having breakfast alongside his granddad. We see him reading a newspaper that says Kevin Bacon abducted by aliens, which of course ties back to that holiday special. Anyway, an interesting thing happens with the text here at the end of the movie. This always talks about characters returning, and for this we get the title saying the legendary Star-Lord will return. Now, I talked about this in our post-credit scene video, but in case you missed that, then there's one of two things that I can see happening. The legendary Star-Lord is the name of his solo comic book series, and who knows, we might even get a film titled that centered around the character. So far, we haven't had any follow-ups to this film announced in this slate, but with a line like that, we may get something like this. Chris Pratt hasn't said whether he'd like to come back or not, but with the text being like this, I think there's a possibility. However, I think that the most likely outcome is that we will see the character come back for either Kang Dynasty or, of course, Secret Wars. If you read the comics, then you'll know that the Earth gets transformed into Battleworld, which is a mesh of all realities. It heavily pulls in the 616 universe, which Peter is of course a member of, and thus it makes sense that he could be brought across by this. If Earth is reformed and Peter is on it, then it's easy just to pick him up and integrate him into the story. However, they might also use Secret Wars as a way to bring across another aspect that I'm guessing this multiverse saga is going to focus on. Now, unlike the other Marvel movies, the text at the end appears in a white background, and this is instead of the usual black one with the white text. This might show that we'll get a similar Star-Lord to what's come before, but that there could be something slightly different about him. Potentially, the multiverse being open means that we could get another Star-Lord, and they might do a variant for that film, or recast the actor going forward. We've even seen this in the likes of Zoe Saldana, who's been very open that Gamora should be recast in the MCU, and recently she's been giving interviews saying, "Just please let me go, please." Now, from what I've been told about the plans of Secret Wars, we're sort of heading for a soft reboot, and it'll likely bring in multiple aspects of the expanded Marvel Universe and unite it into one timeline. There's also going to be new versions of old characters, so they can keep things the same without the actors aging out of roles, and they can just keep pumping the franchise for another 15 years.
I'm Star-Lord.
Now, the final few scenes also tell us what the other Guardians are going off to do. I've already talked about Mantis, but Drax and Nebula remain on nowhere, and together they start a new community with some of the creatures and children that they saved from the High Evolutionary. Drax gets to go back to being a father, which is pretty much the thing he was fighting for this entire time. The Guardians don't end either, and instead we see a new team being formed that's led by Rocket Raccoon. We see Groot's turn into a gigantic version of himself, which I've seen referred to as either Alpha Groot or King Groot. Kind of pick your poison with that, as both these versions are from the comics, and though I lean more towards this being the King one, I'm not mad if you refer to him as Alpha. We also have the good dog Cosmo the space dog, who has popped up a lot in the movie so far. She's been a big part of the comics too, and she's of course based on the dogs that Russia sent out to test space travel. We even get a little CCCP badge on her chest, showing that she is connected to the Soviet Union. Now the group all sit around waiting for some alien animals to arrive so that they can protect their village, and they talk about their favourite songs. It ends with Rocket playing Come and Get Your Love by the band Redbone, which I'm sure you recognise as being from that first movie. Now, I discussed on our last video what way they could take this, and currently we have lots of people out in space that they could end up hooking up with. In the comics, Pip the Troll was one of Warlock's closest allies, and because of this, I could see them bumping into Eros and even the Eternals. We also have the news that Galactus will be coming to the MCU too, and with the Marvels also taking a further focus on space, we have these cosmic characters all out there doing their own thing. I'd love to see them team up at some point, and we could get a Guardians of the Galaxy team made up of space characters which mirrors the Avengers on Earth. Just something I thought about when watching it, but I think that these characters will likely return in Secret Wars if they come back. Kang is going to be the next major threat, so it makes sense to have them all coming together for that. Now, as for my thoughts on the film, I think that this rounds out James Gunn's movies as being some of the strongest in the MCU. I still probably prefer the Captain America trilogy, but it's difficult to think of a better way that Gunn could have closed out his run at Marvel. There's a lot of bittersweet goodbyes, and though not everyone gets the ending that people might have wanted, it all still makes sense. Rather than it feeling like the studio said, well, these characters have to end up together, I feel like the movie used the characters to drive their decisions. So I really appreciate stuff like that instead of just feeling like it's paint by numbers, and it makes sense to draw the line where they do, and for this to also be their final outing. Everyone gets their time to shine here too, and every part of the team brings their best performance. I think that's the case with Gunn too, and you can tell he's mastered his style and sensibilities, and is more than capable of directing big blockbusters like this. Honestly, I know everyone's saying that this kind of saved the MCU, but knowing that he's going off to DC makes his departure as bittersweet as Gamora's is. He's definitely helped steer the company back in the right direction, but he's now on his way over to the competition, so it could potentially backfire on them. Either way though, in the moment I think this is a great return to form, and the perfect way to close things out. Now I do have my criticisms as well, and though everyone's saying that this is the best MCU movie since Endgame, I still think that accolade belongs to No Way Home. That just impacted me a bit more, as I think its ending is one of the best we've ever had in a comic book film, and the deaths and consequences that happen in it also hit home a lot harder. Just getting actors returning that I never thought would smacked me on a different level, which made that a stronger film in my opinion. I think that this movie could have been done with cutting some things down as well, and there are moments that feel a bit repetitive due to Gunn's style. At some point, I feel like he just has an action scene and puts a song over the top to make it feel like we're on a cool journey with the characters, which once in a while can work really well, but at points I just thought this movie became a bit too reliant on doing that, to the point it almost made certain sections feel like they're just music videos. Now when you're making a film that has a composed score, you also have the music that's being created solely to work as part of the scene it's played in. When you grab a song from somewhere else though, that's it. And sometimes the music doesn't quite line up with the moments in the same way a stylized soundtrack would. At points, I feel like the guys just grabbed, now that's what I call movie soundtracks 55, and stuck it over the top of some scenes, but I suppose it does give it its own personality. I'm just nitpicking, as it does work 95% of the time, but I'm trying to make a balanced review that has both positives and negatives. Now, I do think that the High Evolutionary did turn things up to 11, and some of the scenes I was like, the guy's literally just standing there screaming. Can be good in its moments, but sometimes it can be over the top as well, and we see a lot of the characters just shouting things at points. I'm looking at you, Nebula and Mantis, you know what I mean. I also think that some of the jokes follow James Gunn's signature style of humour, which is basically a character saying something stupid, another character going, "You're a moron," and then the character they're calling a moron doubling down and saying something even more dumber. That's kind of what a lot of the jokes fit into, but you know what, I have quite a juvenile sense of humour, you might have guessed, so most of them hit for me, but there were just a couple here and there that didn't fully hit the mark. Still though, we're batting at quite a high average here, and yeah, I did find a lot of moments fun, especially that F-bomb, best part of the movie, first F-bomb in the Marvel Universe, and I really enjoyed it. Also, I've seen a lot of people talking about how much Gunn brings his friends and family into stuff, which they say can be quite distracting. Now, there are points where I can see the valid points in that argument, and the counter-argument to that is always something like, well, Martin Scorsese works with Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro all the time, and I don't hear you complain about that, you fucking dickhead. Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and I think the difference is that De Niro's won multiple Oscars, as has DiCaprio, and before he was even cast in a Scorsese movie, he was in Titanic, which was one of the biggest films of all time. They've done stuff outside of their friends' directors' films, so the counter-argument kind of falls apart for me when you go into that. Now, saying that, you know what to expect with a James Gunn movie, and either this is going to bother you that his friends are in it, or you're just not going to care. I know that it's a criticism a lot of people have, but watching it in this film, I don't think that it's anything to really ding this movie for, because his characters just pop up and they go as quickly as they come in. Everything else around it's really well written, and his brother Sean's a testament to how much having his family involved can work, so yeah, whether that harms the movie for you or not is going to be something that you have to decide yourself. Now in the end, this very much feels like an ensemble piece in which Gunn's bringing together everything he's learned and done since that first Guardians film. At this point, the guy's a master at his craft, he's built this relationship with the actors, and though I don't think some moments fully hit their target, in the end it feels like he stuck the landing on his trilogy, which he should be applauded for. Personally, I still prefer the first Guardians movie, but this is a very close second, and therefore I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. Now obviously, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, so make sure you comment below and let me know. Are you excited to see what Gunn does at DC? Do you think that Marvel's going to lose out losing him? Or do you think they've finally learned what they need to do? Lots of things to talk about, you know, that there's things going on behind the scenes with this movie as well, and I think there's lots of interesting conversations that we could have. Just please keep it respectful, mate. It's the comment section. You're not fighting a war here. Just calm down and we'll all have a good time. Now, as a thank you for doing that, you'll be entered into a competition where we're giving away the Quantumania Steelbook to 3 subscribers on the 15th of May. All you have to do to be on the chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on the film. We pick the comments at random on the 15th and the winners are on screen right now, so if that's you, then message me on Twitter at Heavy Spoilers. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of just the post-credits scenes in which we give our theories about the characters in it and where they could go with them. Huge thank you for sticking through the video. I've been Paul and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Really appreciate you sitting till this point and I'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.